people are different, like you said. And it's funny because when Jamie pulled that up, my mind went to the same place where it's the perfect example of how, you know, people respond differently to different things. And, you know, it's not just a chemical, but food. And this is a big field of inquiry, is like the food, because you've got people battling, just like with the people that are anti-vaxxers versus people that want to vaccinate. You've got people that are saying saturated fat is bad, it's good. Protein's bad, no, it's good. You've got, you know, all these camps of people that all, you know, are just basically like, it's almost like a religion where they know what the best diet is and everyone should do it. And the reality is that it may not be the best diet for everyone, you know, and that's something
that we all vary.
Yeah, I mean, that's something, you know, so before the industrialized, you know, civilization occurred, food was like, the food you would eat was, you know, according to where you lived geographically, right? Because you weren't getting food from all parts of the world. Like, you were basically, whatever you could grow in that part of the world is what you would eat, right? And so, like, people would eat carbohydrates or saturated fats or, you know, various foods, you know, at different rates, because they were, you know, that's what they had, right? And it's thought that, you know, over time that humans adapted to the region, and they adapted so that they could basically process that food better. And at least that's the theory. The reality is, it doesn't matter how it happened. We know that it's true. I mean, people have different variations in genes that are involved in nutrition and also in everything else. So regardless of whether or not that's, you know, how it actually occurred, it happens. And I think one of the best examples of that is a study that was published in 2015 in the Journal of Cell from the Weizmann Institute. 800 different people were given a continuous glucose monitor where their blood glucose levels were measured every 5 minutes. And these people were then, they submitted samples for their DNA to be analyzed, and also their microbiome, which is the bacteria that live in the gut. And so scientists then gave these groups of people various food types, either refined carbohydrate, like white bread, complex carbohydrates, like, you know, like a banana, and then saturated fat, like cheese. And they measured people's glucose response to these various foods, 800 different people. And what was found was that the glucose response varied vastly according to a person's genetic and also microbiome makeup. So people, you would think, well, people are going to have a high blood glucose response to white bread, maybe somewhat to the banana, but there's fiber in there, and that sort of changes the way, you know, the glucose levels reach the blood. But the reality is that some people had high blood glucose to the saturated fat, which is sort of, you know, people don't think about that. So that this was sort of like one of the first proof of principle studies showing in 800 different people that people are different, and they measured the various genes to show it, and also their gut bacteria varied as well, because that changes the way you're metabolizing foods. So some of these genes, like we know, for example, PPR alpha, PPR gamma, FTO, ApoE4, which is what I have, all change the way your body metabolizes fats, and also the way your body transports like fatty acids and cholesterol throughout the body. And people with some of these polymorphisms in these genes, if they eat a high, you know, saturated to low poly or monounsaturated fat ratio, they can actually have more adverse effects. They can have a higher blood glucose, they can have higher LDL cholesterol, they can have a higher obesity risk, higher type 2 diabetes risk, you know. So, and that's, like I said, that's something that most people that would eat a high, you know, saturated fat diet wouldn't have. And so I've actually been able to look at some of my genes, because there's companies now that allow you to do that. And so, you know, I know that I have an ApoE4, so that changes my diet in a way. So, you know, because the ApoE4 not only predisposes you to Alzheimer's disease and also from adverse effects to TBI, but it also affects the way cholesterol is transported in your body, and it doesn't get recycled very well. So I have more cholesterol circulating in my body at any given point compared to my husband, Dan, who doesn't have an ApoE4 allele, and we eat the exact same diet. Like, my LDL will be like 20 points higher than his, you know, like.
Is there a negative health effect to that?
So, well, it gets a little more complicated, but so the LDL cholesterol, by the way, for a long time, it's been thought to be a predictor of heart disease. Because with nutrition, and here's the thing with nutrition, is that a lot of our studies are what's called observational studies, where we look at this population and we look at a disease risk and we say, oh, this person eats that and they have a higher risk of that or a low risk of that, right? So it's a correlation. It's not you're not showing it's a causal factor, right? It's a correlation, and it's notoriously, like, actually my mentor from my postdoc, Dr. Bruce Ames, he has this joke, the analogy, but it's a joke that he tells that really illustrates this type of study, epidemiology. He says that people that are born in Miami are born Hispanic, but they die Jewish. So you're born Hispanic, and if you don't know the rich cultural history of Miami, where there's a big Latino community, people come there from Cuba and various places. Right. But then old people go there to retire because they hate the cold and they want to move to Florida. So you just look at the data. If you just look at the birth records and the death records, you'll be like, oh, people are born Hispanic and they die Jewish. Wow. Right? That is epidemiology. That's
very funny.
It is. And it's a great analogy, because it really does highlight the complexity of doing these types of studies. There's all sorts of other factors that play a role, right? I mean,
sure.
So the thing is that with nutrition in particular, you have to look at not just the epidemiological study, but you have to look at randomized controlled trials where they use biomarkers as predictors of certain diseases. You have to look at animal studies where mechanism is done to understand how things are working. You have to look at the whole picture, because if you just use these studies where, oh, you eat a low protein diet, you have a lower all-cause mortality. Boom, I'm going to be a vegan. Well, guess what? Lots of other things are complicated. There's lots of other factors.